Hello, my friends. Hey, do you remember in the early days of our spiritual journey that a lot of it had to do with getting rid of our ego? Do you remember that? It was a common thing that everybody was trying to get rid of their ego because the ego was bad. And so a lot of the work was when you started going to spiritual gatherings, whether it was satsang or you went to you know, um, a place in India with a guru, an ashram, or just all kinds of other spirituality. There seemed to be more a focus on becoming a more loving human being, and that's the same in church. Um, Not that I'm a church person, but I do know, have a lot of friends who are, and they're always, they're trying to be more loving and more giving. And I think that's all very beautiful. I wish the whole world would practice that because we might find ourselves in a different situation. But the focus was much more on becoming a good human being without an ego, or at least with an ego that was more in control and was not expressing anger. I don't know if there was a specific direction in doing that. There probably was, but a lot of the time it was literally about suppressing it. So if we are focusing on suppressing anything really, as you probably know by now, because things have changed over the years, things have evolved. There's a lot more clarity. There's a lot more depth to our spiritual path. And in those days too, it was like if somebody had that big spiritual awakening and maybe declared themselves a spiritual teacher or was asked by their lineage above them to become a spiritual teacher. That seemed to be the goal. They had reached something that seemed out of reach for the masses, the ordinary people. And the best way we knew how was to simply try and be like them. So we were creating a new version of our separate sense of self, and we just try to improve it. So it became an improvement project of our ego or our separate sense of self. And it doesn't really work. Have you noticed? It may work to a certain extent, and I do believe that it does. The deeper work we do on ourselves absolutely has value. And we move through so many stages in our life, and especially on the spiritual journey. And you can't really skip any of them. And that's where the bypassing comes in. You cannot skip, let's say you have lived as a victim mentality and you have been, victimized and you have a lot of trauma, and so it's only natural that you want to come into your power more. Of course, it's like a natural unfolding or opposite experience of what we have been having. So there is a naturalness in that. And I think a lot of therapy, probably church going, that can help us getting out of that victim mentality. And maybe we can surrender more to the divine and feel more empowered. Maybe we can do some really good therapy, some good coaching, and become more empowered. There's a lot of that. And, there's like Tony Robbins, there was the est movement, all these things that have had a lot of value. So that's when we are becoming more an ego that functions much better, that is not making themselves into a doormat anymore. You're learning to say no when you mean no and yes when you mean yes. These are all stages we all need to go through. So just to go back to like when you are like living as a victim, it's your ego you can't really surrender it. You can't really move through all the way where you are fully surrendered and you become one with the divine. I'm not saying it's not possible, because there are certainly exceptions to everything. But for the most part, we need to move out of that. And I remember in the old days also, they said that, if you want to surrender your ego, you have to have a healthy ego. You cannot surrender a fractured ego, a victimized ego, somebody who lives really like I'm nothing, I'm not worthy of anything. There's nothing to surrender. It needs to be healed in a way where it becomes full, um, it becomes strong, it becomes more sovereign, is capable of doing things. So these are all things that we all need to go through. Now, we may become more loving there, more giving, more successful. And these are all signs that we are rising out of the early stages of our expression here on the planet. And that can also, it can be some sort of a trap where, like, now I can, manifest anything. I'm, doing the law of attraction, and I can manifest anything I want. I can manifest, health and abundance and a new house, a new partner, whatever it is, a better relationship. And again, it's wonderful because that sense of empowerment that we get from that is such a contrast to the sense of being a victim, being an ego that's just like, totally collapsed. Now it's standing up. It's a standing up ego, and it's great. A lot more energy, lots more enjoyment in life. Probably much nicer to be around, unless that empowering feeling becomes a stronger ego where they're feeling better than others. So you see, it's still all in the realm of a feeling of a separate sense of I. It's still a separate sense of I. First, that separate sense felt horrible. Now, this separate sense feels amazing. And sometimes it can be hard to let go of that, because we have moved into this feeling of feeling empowered, and it feels really good. Now, if you are in that place, enjoy it, because the contrast from where we have been before, it's such a wonderful contrast. And I would never say anything bad about it, about myself or others. But then there is that place where where also that feels like it's outgrown, right? I don't want to be a victim now. I don't want to be the empowered one. It's all the ego. And ego to me is really just a separate sense of self. It's not bad. It's just not connected consciously to the divine source inside. That's how I see an ego. That's why you cannot whip an ego into shape or anything like that, or think it's bad or anything. It's just a separate sense of self that's very unconscious, that may become more and more conscious as we move along. And then it really comes to the place, and it seems like for most people, they have to come to the place like, well, that wasn't it either. I'm still not content. I'm doing well. It looks like I'm doing great to others, but inside there's still something not right. There's still something missing. And that's because we still are, guess what? A separate sense of self. We're still identified with that. And so when that's more full, then the choice to surrender it is coming from a very different place than when you are, a doormat or something, because there's not much to surrender. You just want to get out of that. It's just like, I don't want this. I want to feel empowered. So there are these natural pathways that we all seem to go through, probably not all, but most of us. And then when we get to that place, like, this is not it either. So you go, now what? Well, that's when we come to the place where we need to start surrendering that separate sense of self. And again, if we are too attached, emotionally attached to things in the world, or to our ego, attached to being successful, attached to being that separate sense of self, that can go like, hey, I can do it. I don't need God. I can do it myself. Or if we have been traumatized in spiritual endeavors, there's like, I don't need God. I can do it myself, right? So that's all still separate from the divine. A lot of it, if not all, is still coming from these core wounds that we went through when we were in the early stages or in the later stages. It can happen anytime. And instead of suppressing them and holding them tight and separate, like I've talked about a lot lately, they need to be integrated. So there's still an integration that needs to happen even when we are feeling we are on top of the world and we can do anything. Most of it is still coming because from the place where we feel separate, where I have to do it and I can do it. Yeah, there can be a lot of attachment to that. But when you get to the place where that doesn't work for you, I would say it may still work, but it's not fulfilling, it's not gratifying, it's not really giving you what you were hoping for. That's when we can start looking at, okay, what is this? What drives me still into the world to be successful? And then we go to these deeper places where there's still pain, where we may do it all because we feel unworthy based on what happened to us, or basically based on being born into the matrix. It kind of comes with that package when we're born into that sense of separation. So that needs to be brought home, and I've talked a lot about that lately, by just really being able and willing to fully feel that frozenness inside of us that thinks it needs to do all these things to survive and be okay. Those parts need to be integrated. And then when they are more whole, they're not like separate like this, they're beginning to melt, then there is a natural surrender to something other than our separate sense of self. There is a surrender to our true self. And what is this true self? There's a lot of videos here on my channel about that too, and it is really coming into that place where we realize that I am presence, that sense of I, which you can go back and listen to some of the meditations I have on my channel too. But it's like we are basically surrendering into who we already are. The surrender is not to an outer thing, because then it's still duality. Then there's still, this separate sense of self. And now I need to surrender to this amazing God out there, or whatever it is. It is surrendering into who we truly are. So it's like this frozenness, that sense of separateness, when that melts, we melt back into the wholeness that we already are, that I already am. And that's the same when you say that I already am. And then it's kind of getting a sense of what that is. So it's more like a felt sense and not just an idea. And that, of course, is something that is part of our spiritual journey to experience that. And it comes with an energy, it comes with a feeling. For me, it's connected to a deep sense of longing, but it's so deep that I can't touch it with my hands. It's such a deep longing. And that to me it's like my I am is calling me back into I. And that is a very beautiful experience. It's a very simple one. I have a hair in my face. And that is the place that we can start living from and as, by keep returning there until it comes so alive that you can't really get away from it anymore. For me, I can still get away from it, but I can also come back to it really quickly because it's kind of, I know who and what I am at a certain level. I'm not by any means fully realized, but I have enough connection with who I am that I can always go there and know that. And if I have a hard time with it, then I take a little more time to remember. And the meditation that I've offered a number of times is, when you say I, and you let go of all the identities that come with that, like I, Pernilla, your name, your gender, your role, your successes, your beliefs about yourselves, your attachments. There's a sense of, in my case, Pernilla. That is what is the separate sense of self. So, but there is still something left when I don't engage with that. There is still like I am. There is a sensor. There is something there that you can connect with. And that is literally where we need to go all the time, I would say. If you want it, if you don't want it, go and do other things. But just getting a little clarity on this journey that, you cannot get rid of your ego. There's nothing to get rid of. It's just a separate sense that's really nothing. But you can start melting it, that separate sense. It's a sense, a separate sense. It's not real, but it feels like it's real. So it's the feeling. And that's what we work with, of course, to help dissolve that. So I hope that's enough for today. You're always welcome to reach out if you need help with that whole process. No matter where you are, it doesn't matter because we all have to move through these steps till we finally are ready to the big S, the big surrender, back to self. Okay, I wish you a continued, hopefully peaceful Sunday today, and I will see you again soon.